Slot couldn't have done more to get the Liverpool faithful on side. Victories against Ipswich, Brentford and away at bitter rivals Manchester United had confidence flowing. That was until a shock defeat at home to Nottingham Forest caused some in the game to question whether the new manager bubble had burst.
It is a big setback. So if you lose a home game, that's always a setback. Normally, this team is not ending up in the top 10. So if you lose a game against them, that's a big disappointment.
But they bounced back in style, winning 16 out of their next 17 games in all competitions. The Reds beat Manchester City, Real Madrid and Chelsea. Fans were starting to believe, could Slot deliver a league title and maybe more in his first season? How impressive was the response from Liverpool after that defeat to Forest?
It was unbelievable. It was so unexpected, to be honest. I felt like the guys, to be honest, where I felt as though there's no way we go on to win games here, especially when Jurgen's left and his backroom staff as well. You've lost the goalkeeping coach, you've lost Pep Linders, you've lost so many behind the scenes that I was thinking Slot's team are going to have to introduce themselves to people, learn relationships and sort of create that bond before they start winning games and getting Slot's point across. But we just hit the ground running straight away. I've got to be honest, that game against Ipswich, that first game of the season, felt a little bit boring, felt a little bit underwhelming, and I did think to myself, this doesn't feel very exciting. And he takes
not very heavy metal.
No, exactly. We were so used to the Jurgen way, and he takes Quanta off at half time, and he basically says in the post-match interview, he wasn't good enough, so I'm taking him off. And I was so used to Jurgen's personality, sort of defending the players, and he wouldn't have done that. I think he probably would have at least get him to 60 maybe. He wouldn't have hooked someone at that time. And I had the moment of thinking, oh, maybe this isn't what I was expecting. Maybe this isn't the same character as Jurgen. And look, he's not. But he goes on to win 3-0 at Old Trafford, which is absolutely massive as a Liverpool fan. To be able to beat Man United there, that was when I had a little moment of, maybe we will win games with this fella. Maybe we will be able to win something this season, because I had predicted myself that we'd have top 4 and maybe a good cup run. But the fact that we were still having that unity within the team and the players were sort of improving, the likes of Gravenberch being moved into that 6 was absolutely unbelievable. Salah has just been firing on all cylinders, and he's come out and said he's been told he doesn't really have to track back and defend, and he can just sort of be off and get the assists and the goals. No wonder he's nearly breaking records as it stands. And it was just an unbelievable start to the season, and I bought into Slot very, very, very quickly. And I think as Liverpool fans, we romanticise things, and we romanticise managers. Your face will be on the cop, you'll have people like me painting you till the end of time if you win something with Liverpool. And it felt as though very quickly he was buying us all on side, and we were singing his name after Klopp had told us to. I sort of thought it's a bit too early for that, but it didn't take long. Beating Man United, something that you get me singing then once you do that. And yeah, I feel like we all just fell in love with him very, very quickly.
And of course, it's easy to look back on the season now and say, actually, losing to Forest is no big deal. Good team, Forest, the way they've played this year. But a lot of people were starting to go, oh, has the new manager bubble burst already?
Yeah.
And what did you think around that time? Were you still confident even after that?
It felt like everyone was waiting for, as you say, the bubble to burst. So it was constantly, who have Liverpool played? They haven't played anyone decent. The only reason they're on a good run is because they haven't played good sides. Then we started playing good sides. Then there was another reason why it was all going to go wrong. And Forest was just that little sort of chink in the armour where everyone went, see, that this is why it's all going to go wrong. But what I thought from that Forest game, I was at that, and obviously it was disappointing, but I thought immediately, if you looked at games from there on in, it was like he learnt lessons from that. And I think, you look at him and he's like this nice smiley man, and he's really good in press conferences, and he seems friendly, seems like a good, a fella who'd be good to go for a pint with. But I think as time's going on, you're hearing more and more that behind the scenes, he's a little bit ruthless, and he doesn't care about who you are, and he doesn't care about your status, and he'll tell you what he thinks. So it's little bit things like that. He's improved lots of players. You mentioned Gravenberch before, Abby, and he's been a revelation. If it wasn't for Salah, if it wasn't for Van Dijk, you'd be talking about Player of the Year there. And he got more out of Diaz very early in the season as well. So he's got more. He's squeezed a lot out of what he had. I think there was a worry under Klopp that Klopp's magic got all this out of young players, and we almost. We won a cup with a team of school children or whatever, and it was like, would this man be able to do that as well? Well, not really. He got rid of loads of them. He moved them on, he sent them on loan. And even that, you were like, that seems a bit bold, you know. But don't we need some of them lads?
It could go one or two ways from that position, couldn't it?
Yeah.
You could lose the dressing room very quickly when you're making big decisions like that and stamping your authority. But it seemed to win them round from day one because he went on a run of 16 wins out of the next 17 games.
Yeah, absolutely. And that Forest game, if you look back on it now, I think at the time the narrative was, you know, Abby mentioned before, the more methodical nature of football, let's say, the less heavy metal, more, you know, classical music or whatever. And then a team turned up at Anfield and just parked the bus. And I remember early in Jurgen's tenure, he found that difficult, and eventually his team found a way of beating that. And it was like, I wonder if Slot's football, can this slow, methodical, we just pass it and keep the ball kind of way, kind of get through a team who just sit back, defend? And I think that those are the type of questions that were getting asked. But then a couple of teams tried to do the Forest thing, and they got beat. And then you have a period where, you know, you beat Manchester City and Real Madrid in a week. And I think by then, if you're not bought in now, you're never going to be bought in. So, yeah, you're right. The response of getting beat by Forest, I think it was quite over the top. If you look back at it now, it was, yeah, told you so. You know, there's pundits on TV going, they're not going to challenge. There's no chance. It's too slow. It's boring. They're not going to, got no chance. And then they just become a winning machine. And I go back to Gareth's point, you know, first few games of the season, he's subbing Trent Alexander-Arnold off. Just come off. You know, I want Conor Bradley on, or I want Joe Gomez on, or wherever. He looked like he wasn't bothered by reputation. And again, that's bold, you know, it's a bit like stepdad coming in and telling the kids how they can and can't act, you know, you can't have them sweets. And you're like, well, you're not my real dad, you know, you're not Jurgen, well, it doesn't matter, I'm the boss. And it's almost like he stamped his authority on, and it goes back to everything. Footballers just want to win. And if what you're teaching them and what you're telling them to do is getting them 3 points on a Saturday and 3 points on a Wednesday, of course they'll buy in. And when, you know, you're top of the Premier League, you're the only team top of the Champions League winning every single game, of course you're going to buy in, because I mean, how can you knock on his door and say what's going on, and he points you at the two league tables and goes, well, how can you argue with this? So winning solves every problem in football. It always has, and that'll never ever change. And I think it was so key that he did win very early on. And when he did get beat, and again Forest, they responded with a massive winning run. I think all of a sudden, again, you go back to it, if there were any doubts or any underlying current or whatever of, is this for us? I think they were soon dispelled when, you know, like I say, the best teams are turning up at Anfield and getting handily beaten.
Well, you know, you were beating City, Real Madrid, Chelsea. At what stage did you start to believe, oh, actually, we might win this again?
It took me a long time to believe that we were going to win the league. I always just had this doubt in my mind, and I know Man City haven't had the season that they normally have where they go off and win it, but I always had this thing in my mind of, City are going to pick back up here at some point. They always win it. Surely City are going to pick back up. Obviously Arsenal were doing very well, and listen, Arteta's got a good side there, he does, but you know, they haven't managed to win anything this season. But at the time, I still saw Man City as the big threat. So I would say around that time where we beat Man City, we beat Madrid, and obviously Champions League is the massive thing for me. Winning the Premier League's massive. We finally got to do it. Well, we haven't lifted it yet, but we finally got to do it in front of all the fans and have that moment all together. But to do well in the Champions League, those games, they're really important to Liverpool fans. You know, the Champions League is the biggest thing to all of us. So that game against Madrid, especially after all those games that we'd had against them, Champions League finals where they battered us. But the fact that Slot had come in and sort of managed to beat them, I had a moment of maybe the tide's turning here, maybe we will be able to win one of the big ones this year. But it took me a really long time to believe. It probably took me all the way to Man City away when we beat them 2-0, and City were just absolutely attacking us, and we only had about 30% possession. But the fact that we managed to get that over the line and done it in such a professional way, and Slot managed to do it in a way that he wasn't really playing all his football matches, he preferred to have possession, and we got it over the line in the end. That was the moment where I thought, oh yeah, that this could be ours now.
Well, you'd been turned from doubters to believers and back to doubters
again. The doubt
again.
was back a little bit.
Yeah, exactly.
I think back to a couple of moments. There's a draw against Fulham when we were down to 10 men. That was a champion's performance because Liverpool were getting beat twice. They got a fella sent off in 15 minutes. Scored, you know, they were getting beat 1-0 and then 2-1 to come back and even get a point on that, and then look the better team. By the end, Fulham were hanging on. And then there's the game against Brighton where they scored 2 in like a minute. I think Gakpo scores and then Mo Salah scores a worldie, and Anfield's alive and buzzing. And I think that reaction to that Brighton game, I think everyone in the stadium, I think there was a lot of, this is something special here. Like, you know, I think around that time, you know, City had started to drop points, and Arsenal look a bit flaky at this point in time as well. They were big character moments, because I don't think anyone's ever doubted Liverpool's talent or quality. It was just after they got the bottle, because you know, for all what it's worth, there was some suggestions the year before that maybe that had gone. You know, they were on course to win 4 trophies and then they win the 1 and they kind of fade away in the other competitions. So I think there was a bit of like, if they still got that bottle, that determination, that drive, but then when you hang on again, you know, well, I say hang on, you come back and almost beat a very good team at home with 10 players, and then you can score 2 goals in a minute in a game where you haven't played particularly well, and Anfield's alive. It was around then, I think, most supporters like, we've definitely got, there's something here, it can be built on this. Abby's right, City are like the ghost of Christmas past. You're always just waiting for them to turn up at the wrong time. I think it's soon become evident that wasn't going to happen. But I think when you see those games and you think, yeah, they've got a real determination here, and credit to the manager for instilling that into them.
Yeah, things were starting to happen in different ways, I think, as well. You know, so the Fulham one is on Arne Slot. You know, how many managers, down to 10 men, suddenly go like, oh, well, just go 3 at the back, 5 up front, absolutely storm them, go at them, try and win the game. It was really bold. Like, I remember being on the cop looking at him, we were all going, what's he doing here? You know, this is a bit mad. We could get beat here, like, but it was him going for the win. It was him saying, I'm trying to win the league here, lads. And I absolutely loved that. I adored that. I was like, he's got some real single-mindedness about him. He doesn't care. You know, the outside noise. You think, and we've had a lot of it this season. You know, the contract rebels and all that. Every season, every press conference, every game, every week, asked about that. It annoyed me as a fan. It must have annoyed him. It must have been a distraction. And yet he's ploughed on through and won us the league anyway.
A terrific start had the Reds believing that maybe, just maybe, the title could be coming back to Merseyside. But the season didn't come without its challenges. The Reds were knocked out of 3 competitions in just over a month, losing to Plymouth Argyle in the FA Cup, exiting the Champions League to PSG on penalties, and falling short at Wembley in the Carabao Cup final against Newcastle. They also found themselves on the end of a last-gasp equaliser in the final Merseyside derby at Goodison Park. Slot was sent off amid unsavoury scenes at the final whistle.
So the end of the derby and Slot gets sent off. Was that the pressure getting to him? Or was this just part of his personality all along that we just hadn't seen yet, do you think?
I was made up to see him show that emotion and prove that he actually bought into the derby and he understood its significance, and that Tarkowski goal obviously irritated him as much as it irritated all of us. And obviously Curtis Jones is going over to Decore as he's having a go at our away end, and I didn't mind either of those red cards. I had no problem with that at all, because it signified to me these are really serious about getting these results over the line, and that 2-2 has just been an absolute shot wound to them, just like it felt to all of us. And obviously Curtis has wanted to defend his own fans in that moment, but when it comes to Slot, it just felt like that was a little bit of his personality finally coming out. We'd had this cool, calm, collected fella that wouldn't really let up much in any of the press conferences. You'd ask him about the contracts, you'd ask him about the league, and he just wasn't really coughing on anything, and he was just acting like the derby was another game. To be honest, in the press conference, he was sort of saying, I understand that it's an important game, but this is just someone nearly fighting relegation that we've got to play against. And when you're seeing that emotion and how irritated he was by the way that it had went, that just proved to me, he's bought into this football club. He understands what the derby means. He knows what it means to have drawn in that game, which actually, I'm very grateful that we drew in that game in the end, because it meant we all got to celebrate against Spurs at home, because if we'd have won that game, the results would have went differently, and, we probably wouldn't have celebrated the league altogether. But I loved that. I love the fact that he come out and had that personality, and we were finally getting to see who Slot is, and if he wants to be dead angry about games like that, like the derby, just like me, he can be.